A Cold War relic just became America's most dangerous bomber, not because it carries nuclear bombs, not because it's invisible like the B-2, but because the U.S. Air Force is turning it into something no one saw coming. A missile truck that can vomit out more long-range weapons in a single sortie than most entire air forces could launch in a week. Right now, on paper and in test plans, a force of about 45 B-1B Lancers is being reshaped into the kind of platform that keeps Chinese and Russian planners awake, an aircraft that can haul staggering numbers of standoff and hypersonic missiles from outside their defenses and erase high-value targets before they can react. For decades, the B-1B was the workhorse bomber. The Bone B-1, shortened and twisted by pilot humor, spent years dropping JASSMs in Afghanistan and Iraq, supporting troops on the ground, useful, reliable, but not something you'd call revolutionary. Then engineers looked again at what this 40-year-old bomber could actually carry. And the answer changed everything. You're watching Elite U.S Millitary. Today we're breaking down how the B-1B Lancer is being turned from a denuclearized, almost retired bomber into a missile-carrying monster that could define the next phase of American air power. For most of its life, the B-1B has been living under a kind of identity crisis. It was born out of a 1970s requirement for a high-speed strategic bomber that could beat Soviet defenses. The original B-1A was intended to fly high and fast, Mach 2+ at altitude. But cost, vulnerability, and politics killed that version. When the program came back under Reagan as the B-1B, it was a different machine, a little slower at the top end, optimized for low-altitude penetration and carrying a truly massive conventional and nuclear payload. Then the Cold War ended. Arms control treaties kicked in. The B-1B's nuclear role was stripped away. Internal wiring was removed. External pylons were sealed. By the mid-1990s, the Lancer was officially a conventional-only bomber. That demotion, weirdly, saved it. While the B-2 Spirit stayed locked into its high-end strategic niche, the B-1B rolled into every regional war Washington chose to fight. Over Iraq in the late 90s, over Kosovo, over Afghanistan and Iraq after 2001, the Bone proved something simple and brutal. If you need to drop a lot of precision ordnance over a long day, it is hard to beat a bomber that can haul 75,000 pounds of payload at high subsonic speed. Special operations teams in the mountains used to say that hearing a B-1 check-in on the radio felt like cheating. One call, and they had a flying magazine of JDAMs and other guided weapons overhead for hours. But that work came at a price. Small wars add up. Hot, dusty airfields, long loiter times, low-level, high-speed runs. By the late 2010s, the fleet was showing serious fatigue. Structural cracks forced inspections and grounded aircraft. Maintenance hours per flight hour climbed into ugly territory. In 2021, the Air Force decided to retire 17 of the worst airframes, leaving a smaller core of roughly mid-life B-1Bs to carry the flag until the new B-21 Raider arrived in numbers. The official plan sounded simple: nurse the remaining bones along, use them where you can, and gradually hand their missions to stealthier, newer bombers. Then someone in a briefing room looked at a line on an old engineering drawing. The B-1B, they remember, used to carry weapons externally. Those hardpoints had been welded over when the bomber lost its nuclear mission. But the structure was still there. The space was still there. The physics were still there. What if you reopened those hardpoints not to hang gravity nukes, but to hang hypersonic and long-range cruise missiles? That's where the story shifts from maintenance plan to game changer. Internally, the B-1B has always been a beast. It features 3 internal weapons bays, each one capable of carrying racks of bombs or missiles. Modernized, that meant up to 24 long-range standoff weapons inside, JASSM, class missiles. For years, planners already treated the Bone as a serious standoff strike platform. But external carriage changes the math. By reopening and upgrading the 6 original external hardpoints mounted along the fuselage under the wing roots, engineers realized they could add massive additional capacity. Not small stores, heavy ones. Modern structural analysis and computer-aided design allowed companies like Boeing to model, load adaptable modular pylons lamps. These aren't just simple bomb racks, but robust, aerodynamic pylons capable of handling thousands of pounds per station, shaped and reinforced to minimize drag and bad airflow around the variable sweep wings. In testing and studies, Each pylon is envisioned to hold multiple missiles. Across 6 stations that yields not just a couple of extras, but the potential for a full additional dozen weapons externally, on top of what's inside. Concept of operations documents and test footage from recent years sketch out what that looks like in the real world. And those aren't dumb iron bombs. Each one is a guided weapon with a range measured in hundreds of kilometers, with stealth features and smart seekers designed to hit ships, hardened bunkers, radar arrays, and command posts. Now plug in hypersonics. The U.S. has been testing air-launched hypersonic weapons like the AGM-183 ARRW and working on the Hypersonic Attack Cruise Missile, HACM. These are missiles expected to fly at Mach 5 along complex, hard-to-track trajectories. In Air Force talking points and industry proposals, the B-1B repeatedly shows up as a prime candidate for carrying them. Why? Volume and flexibility. If you can fit a few hypersonic missiles in each bay and hang more externally, you're suddenly looking at credible numbers. Not one experimental missile on a test jet, but dozens of operational hypersonic weapons per sortie once systems mature. Even conservative notional loadouts say 1012, hypersonics mixed with other standoff weapons, are more than enough to give any integrated air defense system nightmares. Mass matters. Hypersonics are hard enough to intercept one at a time. Now imagine a wave of them coming in from multiple angles and altitudes, guided by off-board sensors, launched by an aircraft that never had to cross the enemy's coastline. The external pylon work is what makes those numbers realistic. It turns a big bomber with 3 internal bays into what it truly wants to be, a flying missile barge. You can see how quickly that changes the way adversaries have to think. To understand just how disruptive this is, zoom out and look at the strategic timing. Right now, the U.S. bomber force is in what planners call a bathtub. Numbers dip as old B-1Bs and B-2 South retire or spend long stretches in deep maintenance, while the new B-21 Raider ramps up slowly. Industrial limits mean you can't just snap your fingers and double B-21 deliveries. Northrop Grumman can only build so many at once, and stealth bomber production is one of the most complex industrial chains on Earth. At the same time, the threat environment is getting nastier. China is flying H-6 bombers around Taiwan, testing air defense reactions. Its navy is growing fast, with carriers, destroyers, and frigates pushing farther into the Pacific. Its rocket force fields long-range anti-ship ballistic missiles explicitly designed to hold U.S. carriers at risk. Russia, despite its economic and military problems, continues to rely on a vast integrated air defense network and long-range fires to threaten NATO. In that context, long-range standoff strike capacity isn't a luxury. It's oxygen. A B-1B turned into a missile truck gives American commanders something they can use now. A platform that can launch from the continental U.S., Guam, Diego Garcia, or allied bases. Reach launch boxes well clear of the hardest SAM coverage. Unload dozens of precision missiles at concentrated target sets. Then either turn for home or relocate quickly to another task and picture a crisis in the Western Pacific. Chinese ships are massed around a contested island chain. Coastal air defenses are on high alert. Carrier groups are being pushed back by anti-ship ballistic threats. Into that picture, the U.S. sends a B-1B task force. They don't fly straight at the coast. They fly around the edges, using tankers and carefully chosen routes to reach safe firing positions. They're cued by P-8 Poseidons, satellites, submarines. F-35s and other scouts, they release salvos of LRASMs and other standoff munitions. Dozens of missiles fan out, each one homing on a different ship or coastal battery. Even if China's defenses shoot many of them down, the numbers are ugly. Some get through. Ships burn. Coastal radars die. The very act of defending forces Beijing to light up its best systems, revealing them for follow-on strikes. Now swap LRASMs for hypersonics. Instead of subsonic sea skimmers, the B-1 is kicking loose Mach 5 weapons aimed at hardened air bases, mobile missile units, and critical command nodes hundreds or thousands of kilometers in length. Defenders have minutes, maybe less, to detect, classify, and try to engage. Anything that survives the first wave is under pressure from the second and third. And remember, this is a stopgap. The B-1 isn't the final form of America's future bomber force. It's the bridge that carries the U.S. from a legacy fleet into a fully fielded B-21 inventory. From a certain angle, that might sound unglamorous. In reality, it's as serious as it gets. Because sometimes when the brand new systems are still trickling off the line, the war you didn't want refuses to wait. The real shock for America's adversaries, and even some of its own skeptics, is philosophical. For years, a loud chorus said the US had become addicted to exquisite platforms, tiny fleets of hyper-advanced aircraft that cost so much and are so complex, they can be risked or fielded in real numbers. There was truth in that. B-2 fleets you can count on your fingers. Small lots of ultra-secret aircraft waiting for the big one that never quite comes. The B-1B upgrade story cuts against that grain. Here, an airframe designed in the 1970s, built in the 1980s, beaten up in the 2000s, is being given a third life. Not by pretending it's stealthy, not by forcing it into missions it's not suited for, but by asking a simple, ruthless question. What can this thing still do better than anything else we have? The answer turned out to be carry a lot of big, heavy, long-range weapons fast. So the US is leaning into that. While the B-21 is groomed to be the tip of the very sharpest spear slipping into the densest airspace, the B-1B is being sharpened into the sledgehammer behind it. Not subtle, not invisible, but devastating in what it can throw from the edge of the fight. For you, watching this, there's a second lesson. Every time you see a headline about obsolete US hardware, or aging platforms, remember the B-1B story. Remember the 45 airframes that were supposed to limp along quietly into retirement, and then discovered they could become something the world has never quite seen. A non-stealth bomber acting as a theater-scale missile barge. For the planners in Beijing and Moscow, that's not a YouTube talking point. It's a new column on their threat slides, a new color on their range rings, a new variable in the equations they use to decide what they can risk, where, and for how long. For the crews at Ellsworth, Dyess, and other B-1 bases, it's something more direct. It means that every time they walk out to that swing-wing jet, strap in, and light the engines, they're not climbing into a relic. They're climbing into a reloaded weapon, repurposed for a much harder, much faster, much more dangerous era than the one it was born for. You've been watching Elite U.S. Millitary. If you want a dedicated wargame episode where we walk through a step-by-step B-1B missile strike against a Chinese carrier group or coastal defenses, routes, loadouts, likely responses, tell us in the comments. Type bone so we know you made it to the end and you're re-ready for the next level. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to Elite U.S. Millitary, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming breakdowns from brand new stealth bombers rolling out of hidden hangars, to Cold War machines like the B-1B that refuse to die, and come back more dangerous than anyone expected.